I have no reason not to be humble. Everything, all the experiences that I've had, I didn't deserve it. I didn't earn it. It's by the grace of God. I was taught as a child from my father, bloom where you're planted. And the greatest gift I knew that I could bring into that family and everyone I came in contact with is that God loves them. I believe if you write a book, you have to give the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that's why it took me 10 years. And that's why I wrote it. It's very simple.
Okay, so joining us now on Open Book is Drew Hammer, an entrepreneur, an evangelist, and an author. And the title of the book is Hammered, which is a double entendre, obviously, because it's about the Hammer family. And I love the title. But Drew, it's great to have you here. When I was 23, I'll just tell you this, I think you'll enjoy this. When I
Okay.
was 23, I was working at a law firm in Southampton, New York, and my boss said to me, "Here's $35. I want you to go to Southampton Books, and I want you to buy me, and I want you to buy you a copy of Hammer by Armand Hammer.
Wow.
And I want you to come back, and you and I are going to read this book. It's the month of June. We're going to finish it by July 1. And then you and I are going to have a discussion about this legendary entrepreneur, art collector, energy maverick, Armand Hammer." And so
Wow. That's amazing.
yeah, that's a true story, and that's
Wow.
and you may remember that book, of course, right? And that book came
Of
out
course.
in July of 1987. So I'm sorry, June of 1987. All right, but before we go into your book, which I loved, let's start about your early years, your upbringing, a little bit of your life story, if you don't mind.
Okay. I would love it.
Hey everyone, it's Anthony Scaramucci here with some straight talk. Let me tell you, we've got 85% of our viewers who haven't hit the subscribe button yet. What's up with that? It hurts. Listen, I made my career by going all in. Right now, only 15% of our viewers are part of our subscribed family. So please take action. This helps us book more amazing guests. Hit subscribe, join our community, and let's turn these numbers upside down. Now back to the show.
Well, I'm a small town girl from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and neither one of my parents grew up with any type of religion. And a group of Christian businessmen led my dad to Jesus, and it completely changed our entire family. My dad went from being raised extremely poor to becoming a workaholic because he did not want to raise his children the way he was raised, every month thinking, are we going to make it? And he just became totally consumed to the exclusion of his family. And that he said this group of Christian businessmen that he met, they had a peace that he did not have. And he wanted that because he kept setting goals, reaching the goals, never got, I mean, once he got there, he wasn't happy. So he found the Lord. And so I was raised in a very strong Christian family, but thankfully, it wasn't a religious family. It wasn't about religion. My dad said something to me when I was 5 years old. He said, Drew, the longest distance in the world is 12 inches. It's moving God from a head knowledge where you think you know him to a down to your heart to a personal relationship. And that really changed my entire life. And then I met Michael Hammer on the airplane, and I'm whisked into this crazy life that I knew nothing about. But because I had my faith, that's what gave me really, truly my stability. And, I have a lot of great stories in there, like the one with James Roosevelt, where it was really life changing for me, where I realized, because I was very intimidated at first and thought, oh my gosh, I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I'm a small town girl. I went to Oklahoma State and I two-stepped on the weekends. What am I ever going to have to talk to these people about? And I just talked to him about God, and he ended up really accepting Jesus that night. And he was elderly in a wheelchair. And the Lord spoke to me that night, and he said, Drew, you may not be a blue blood. You may not have gone to an Ivy League school, have some huge career, but you led him to me. And that is more important than anything in the world because that's eternal.
So for people that don't know the family, because I have a lot of young listeners, obviously they know your son, but they don't know Armand Hammer. They probably don't know who Michael Hammer is. I do. Let's talk a little bit about them. So these are brilliant
Okay?
people. These are brilliant people,
Yes.
entrepreneurs that made the equivalent of what would be billions of dollars today in today's terms,
Right?
big in the energy markets. You're a small town girl. You meet this very ritzy, let's call it ritzy,
Okay.
family, and you have to make an adaptation. So how do you make this adaptation joining this oil tycoon's family?
Well, it's actually kind of a funny story, Anthony. So the first time I met Armand, no, actually the second time, excuse me, we flew out for Christmas, and he was a Russian Jew, but they celebrated Christmas as a holiday. I don't think as a religious practice, but as a holiday. And I remember walking into his home, and there were five of us there. And he had a man in a tuxedo playing a grand piano with a huge tub of Russian caviar and Russian vodka that he would bring back from his trips in Russia. And I knew who he was, sort of. We didn't have Google back then.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew he started a company called Occidental Petroleum. And funny enough, he actually bought Occidental when he was retiring. And there were three employees, and he paid $125,000 for the company. And he had never seen an oil rig before in his entire life, knew nothing about the energy business. And he had his chauffeur, Andy, drive him out to Bakersfield and asked him to show him what an oil rig actually looked like in person and how it worked. So it's just kind of a funny story. And then, of course, Occidental became one of the largest, oil and gas companies in the world. But when I met him, I didn't know any of those facts. I just knew that it was a big family, and it was so impersonal that first Christmas, because my family is like the Norman Rockwell family, where we have matching flannel pajamas with our names monogrammed on them. And I walked in, and it was so formal, and the butler comes in his tuxedo on Christmas Day, and they served the Christmas dinner, and it was a whole procession with the big silver trays with the silver domes over them. And I'm like, what is going on? And they small talked. They really didn't know each other. And I think one thing a lot of people don't realize is when you accomplish what an Arm and Hammer accomplishes. You're not home at 5 o'clock to have dinner with the family. You're traveling the world. There's always a sacrifice involved. So I felt like the family members really didn't know each other. And I thought, well, I think that's my part, because I grew up in this incredible, loving family that always put God first. So after the Christmas lunch, Armin says to me, Drew, I'd like to speak with you in my office. Well, I honestly don't think I knew enough. I was 23 years old, a year out of college. I don't think I knew enough to even be intimidated by Armand. So I was like, okay. So we walk into his office, and I start laughing. And he said, what's so funny? And I said, you have a private library in the Dewey Decimal System? I'm like, are you kidding me? So he got a kick out of that. And he talked to me, and he said, I'd like to ask you not to work, because Michael's my only grandson, and I'm getting older. He was in his, I guess, mid 80s then.
Yep.
And he said, I want Michael to travel around. I want him to take over the foundation. He would never say when I die, he would say if I die. We always got a kick out of that. And so I said to him, I said, well, I would like to ask something of you. And he goes, well, what would that be? I said, well, I would like you to come over our home anytime you're in town and have Sunday brunch with us. And I would love to teach you how to be a family. And I look back and I'm mortified. I'm like, I could not believe I had the guts to say that to him. But again, I was probably too naive not to think that wouldn't be appropriate. So, funny enough, he had gotten older by then, and he was home a little more. He wasn't traveling as much. And every single Sunday he was in town, he came to our home. And he learned to be a family, and he fell in love with his great grandchildren. And I have a funny story in the book that he even would come over in his limousine filled with toys. And one time he had a kiddie pool tied to the top of his limousine with ropes going through the car. He just got the biggest kick out of it.
You see, the coolest part of your story is the realness. I mean, you're an incredibly down to earth person, but you're a great dresser. You have it's like a weird thing. Like you would like look at you, and you wouldn't realize at first blush, given your life experience, who you've interacted with, how down to earth you are. But when you read your book, it's incredibly revealing. It's very vulnerable, your book, and it's very much so about real life. But I want to start with the highbrow stuff first, and then, if you don't mind, I want to go to your divorce because
Please.
you write about it, and it's very real, and I think it's in some ways, Drew, therapeutic for other people to hear your story.
That's my
Uh,
goal right there.
and I appreciate that, and I got that from the book. But let's go to the royalty and the world leaders and the business heads first. You share some great anecdotes. Why don't you tell us one or two of those? And then I want to switch over to something that was probably traumatizing for you, but
Okay.
also the way you share it, I think, is very hopeful for the rest of us. So let's start with the world leaders. Okay, give us a few stories, Drew, if you don't mind.
Okay. Well, before I do that really quickly, when you say it's so real, is I believe if you write a book, you have to give the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that's why it took me 10 years. And it was actually a real cathartic exercise, if you will, for me, because as I was writing, I just started out by journaling. And as I was writing, I realized, oh my gosh, I haven't really forgiven. In my mind, I thought I had forgiven, but I really hadn't totally forgiven because, sometimes you just want to twist that knife just a little bit. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I wrote it. And the reason why you talk about, humility is I have no reason not to be humble. Everything that God, all the experiences that I've had, I didn't deserve it. I didn't earn it. It's by the grace of God because I was taught as a child from my father, bloom where you're planted. And the greatest gift I knew that I could bring into that family and everyone I came in contact with is that God loves them. It's very simple. We're created as spiritual beings on this earth. We're physical, mental, and spiritual beings. And I believe you can have everything in the world and not have the spiritual aspect, a relationship with our Creator, and you can be the most unhappy person in the world. So that leads into what you were asking me about the highbrow people. So I even had an amazing several experiences with Princess Di. And Armand was Prince Charles's godfather, if you will, because he was great friends with Lord Mountbatten. And then when he died, Armand and Prince Charles had become very close. And they started the United World Colleges together. So there were several events. And when you go to those things and people are paying $50,000 a plate or $150,000 for the weekend, you're not going to see 30-year-olds there for the most part. It's people who are all obviously successful and established. So we were usually thrown into rooms with a lot of older people. So a lot of times they would put Princess Di and myself together because we were having sons at the same time and we would have something in common. And the first couple times I met her, it was usually pleasantries and it was surface. And I understand that because she had been betrayed so many times in the press. So
Mm-hmm.
you can't push it. She has to instigate it. So we would say, how much we love our sons and how wonderful it is to have two sons, that kind of thing. But the third time I met her, Armin's spouse had just died, Frances, and she was an amazing woman. And there was a big event in Washington, D.C., and he asked if we would go in his place. And it was a big fundraiser for the Opera House there. And Prince Charles and Princess Di were going to be there because part of the portions were going into the United World Colleges. So she walked up to me and she said, "Hello, Drew." And I remember thinking in my mind, okay, this is the weirdest thing in the world. I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I'm a small town girl, and Princess Di knows who I am. She remembers my name. So I was like, wow. But she says to me, she said, "I want you to know how sorry I am about Frances. I loved her. We've spent a lot of time together and she was always so wonderful to me." And then she leaned in and she says, "By the way," she said, "nobody had jewels like Frances." And she leaned in and kind of looked around and she said, "Did you get the jewels?" Well, I start laughing because I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Your princess died and you have a vault of royal jewels. And I said that to her and I go, and you're asking about Frances's? And she goes, oh, no one has jewels like her. And I just thought, this is my opportunity. And I said to her, I said, yes, I did. And let me say something to you. I said, when she died, she didn't take any of it with her. Nobody goes to heaven with a U-Haul. What she took with her was her relationship with Jesus. And I said, Princess Di, you have everything in the world. I go, but if you don't have Jesus, you're going to be empty. And I want you to know that he loves you. And then I just kind of dropped it because you can only say so much.
Right.
And then later on, God called me to write her a letter because she was going through really the traumas of she was anorexic, her eating disorders and,
Yeah.
her infidelities with Prince Charles. And I was going through the same thing, really. I think I was an exercise anorexic. And the Lord just had me write her a letter. Well, you can imagine how embarrassing it is to go to the post office when you have to get an overseas stamp and you say, it says Princess Di, and I had her private home address on there. And I'm sure the postman looks at me and goes, like a child sending a letter to Santa Claus or something. But the whole point is the highbrow stories is I really believe that God put me there for a reason because I didn't want anything from anyone. And obviously I really don't care what people think about me because
Mhm.
I've been destroyed in the press, but oh well, because I feel like I'm doing what God's called me to do. But so many
I
times.
feel like if you haven't been destroyed in the press, Drew, I mean, what's the sense of living, right?
That's right.
I've
We've
had
earned
every
that, right?
possible, yeah, exactly. I've had every possible thing happen to me that you can imagine. It's not that big of a deal. But let's talk about you had a difficult divorce after 27 years of marriage, and talk about getting through that, and then also, if you don't mind, the moment that you had in Israel.
Oh, of course. I love that's one of my favorite stories in the world because that's when God showed up. And that's the first time I knew I was going to be okay. So when I met Michael, we had this whirlwind romance. We met on an airplane. It was literally, if anyone could believe in love at first sight, that's what it was. And we were engaged in 3 weeks. I started talking to him about God and how important that was to me. I brought him home to my dad, and my dad prayed with him, and he accepted Christ. And, we went to church and had Bible studies from then on. And I just believed when you walk down the aisle, you don't walk down saying, well, maybe this will work, hopefully this is right. No, I was madly in love with Michael, and I believe he was madly in love with me. He actually had a very abusive childhood, and we never dealt with that. So I wish I knew then what I know now. We probably would have been in years of counseling, but there were a lot of infidelities in our marriage that I found out about. And I
Okay.
was truly heartbroken
Hmm.
because, my parents had a 67-year magnificent marriage. And I believe that my parents were more in love the day my mother died than the
Hmm.
day they walked down the aisle. And that's all
Hmm.
I've ever known. So I was just so heartbroken and devastated. I thought, we're going to grow old together. We're going to play with our grandchildren and have those Christmases where you wake up and drink coffee and, the whole thing. And I was completely, completely devastated. And the crazy thing was, Anthony, is we had a fabulous marriage. He was brilliant, like the Hammers. And thank God my son's got that side of the family's brains.
Hmm.
I'm just scrappy. And he was funny and we had a blast together. We very seldom argued, but I think he found his self-esteem and affirmation from the attention of other women. And he was extremely good looking, like our son Army and Victor, our two sons. And I was really devastated. And I was so devastated that I probably got down to 110 pounds and I'm 5'8". My hair fell out. I was gray. I was just devastated. I didn't know what to do with myself. And Kathy Lee Gifford calls me and she said, we're going to Israel and you need to walk where Jesus walked. And I said, great. So when my divorce was finalized, we go to Israel. And when I tell you, I became a Stepford wife. It was like I was a robot just getting through the day, but I completely shut down my emotions. I mean, I'm a little stubborn, to be perfectly honest. So I'm like, he is never going to see me cry. I would never give him that satisfaction. And I just became this empty shell, if you will, with no emotion. So the first 5 days I was there, I was walking around. I'm walking down the road of Gethsemane that we read in the Bible, and I felt nothing. And the fifth day we were there, we were in Caesarea, where Paul stood trial before King Herod for preaching the gospel. And I look down and I see this rock, this little stone, and it's in the shape of a heart, but it isn't a perfect commercial heart. It literally looked like the heart had been hammered. And I remember thinking, that rock is exactly how my heart feels. My heart is so broken and hammered. And I picked it up. And, I don't know if anybody believes me about this, but this is exactly what happened. All of a sudden, this warmth came down me. I felt like the Lord had poured warm olive oil down my body. And for the first time, the Lord's not the first time he spoke to me, but for the first time I was warm. And I'm holding this stone in my hand, and the Holy Spirit spoke to me. And he said, I'm going to take your heart of stone and turn it to flesh, and I'm going to heal your heart. And I began weeping. It was like the emotional floodgates were opened. And from that moment, I thought, I'm going to be okay. I didn't know if I was going to be okay. I was so heartbroken.
Oh, look, it's a beautiful story. Obviously, I don't beat my religious drum that often, but I was raised Catholic, Roman
Right?
Catholic. I've been to Jerusalem on many occasions, and I have a tremendous amount of faith. And so I wanted you to share the story. Let's uh, let's talk about your son for a second. Okay, this is
Okay.
a very impressive young man, Army Hammer. As
Thank
you
you.
said, an incredibly good-looking guy, a movie star. Okay, you say in your book that he was morally wrong, but he wasn't a criminal. Sometimes people get into trouble. You're a mom. You also believe in redemption and forgiveness, which I think is one of the hallmarks of our civilization. I'm not really sure how we
Yes.
could exist as people if we don't have an opportunity for redemption and forgiveness. And so let's talk a little bit about him for a second and some of your thoughts there that you put in the book.
Well, I actually originally did not want to put that in my book because I just felt like it was his story to share and not mine. And one thing I will say, he's a bigger person than I am because when all of this was going on, I knew what was really going on in the background. I mean, these women stayed in my home and they were puppy dogs around my son. And I knew that there was no rape going on there, trust me. And but anyways, I finally called him one day and I was like, okay, if you're not going to talk about it in the press, I've been getting a zillion requests from Vanity Fair to you name it. I go, can I? And he's like, no, Mom, we're not going to talk about it. The truth always comes out. So I wasn't going to approach it in my book, but my editor, who made sure I didn't have any grammatical errors, which I'm sure I had a bunch of them, he called me one day and he said, Drew, if Army was your nephew, if he was a distant cousin, you don't have to deal with it. He's your son, and you can't pretend like this didn't happen. This is the white elephant in the room. And if you're going to write a book, you have to discuss this because this has been the last 4 years of your life and it's your family. And I really prayed about it. So, what I did is I wrote that chapter on everything that happened during cancel culture. Not everything, of course, because I want to protect some people involved. But I wrote about it and I sent Army and Victor a copy because Victor was going through his own trials with, that's another whole long story, but Michael's, the woman that he married for the last 5 years of his life, there's been a lot of changes in wills, if you will. I won't go into details, but I had to face these things. So I wrote the chapter and I sent it to my sons first. And I said, You will always be a priority over any book or anything I ever do. So if there's anything in there that you would like taken out, I'll take it out because you're more important to me than this. And Army read it and wrote me back immediately. And he said, Mom, I'm so proud of you. I think you handled it with integrity. He said, I wouldn't change one word. And then my other son said, you're right on everything you wrote about, but because we are in legal issues, we have to take a few of these things out because we have not settled. And I said, great, we'll take them out. So, it was something I had to deal with. And this was probably, I also had to deal with Army's molestation at 14 because I feel like that was my biggest failure as a mother. And again, if I knew then what I know now, I didn't know that a youth pastor would groom the parents and look you in the eyes and go to dinner with you and go on family vacations with you while they could ever be doing that behind your back. I was very naive about it. I'm the first to say, because growing up in my little Pentecostal background, I was never exposed to it. And by the way, maybe it did happen, but it was swept under the carpet. So I'm grateful that today it is coming out so it can be dealt with. But at the time also, I didn't realize that children would blame themselves. So Army said to Michael and me, look, I'm not going to youth group anymore. He's being inappropriate, but nothing happened because he felt it was his fault. And I think that was really stemmed a lot of the problems and issues that he had as an adult because he had never dealt with it. Because in our minds, we didn't think anything really happened. And we probably should have been way more proactive because, like Army said to us, but Mom, even if a youth pastor, someone in an authority in church and, pretending to be this big Christian and ministering to all these kids, even if they attempt something, it really screws up a child. And I said, you're right. I did not even think about that. So that was one of my biggest failures, but I had to deal with that as well. Because again, if you're going to write a book, be honest and hopefully people can learn from your mistakes and they can learn from how faithful God was to me. Because the last thing I want to do is write a book that preaches to people and, is in their face. I just wanted to kind of show the world that it starts with forgiveness, because if you don't forgive, it will destroy your life. And then God can start healing you, and how faithful God is when we hit rock bottom and when our hearts are hammered.
Listen, it's a beautiful story, and I let you go. I didn't want to interrupt you for 1 second because I think your message is a riveting message, and
Thank you.
I wanted to make sure that I gave you the time to speak about it. There's one other thing I want to bring up before I get into the last part of this episode, if you don't mind. I want
Sure.
to talk about hitting bottom. I've
Oh,
hit
I'm a
bottom.
pro at that.
But I have too, though, Drew. I think this is why I relate so well to your book. I've hit bottom. I've been fired from the White House. I've had business mistakes where I've been in business with the wrong people, made investment decisions sometimes that have gone really poorly for me. And if you're a high profile person, you are one. I am one. You have to face the music. You get a lot of chin music when you're dealing with that. So what are some of the things that you do from a self-talk perspective to build up your resilience and to build up this wonderful spirit and bounty of optimism?
Well, I've always stood on this is I think it's very interesting that in the Bible it says do not fear 365 times. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think every day God is telling us, do not fear. And the interesting thing about the whole ordeal when I went through my divorce, when the whole cancel culture happened with my son, and it's one thing to go through it in private, but when it's all over the press, all over the world, Army at one time was the number 3 person in the world Googled. And it was during that period when he was being canceled because it was the perfect storm. it was COVID. People were stuck in their homes. They couldn't go to their office. They were lonely. So it was this feeding frenzy online. So it truly was the perfect storm. But here's reality. Like you said, you and I have both been through many, many trials. But the thing is we can sit around and worry about it, lose sleep, take away our joy, rob us of anything. And there's so many things in this world that we really do not have control over. We think we do, but we really don't. And at that time, Michael and I, had to watch our son spiral, and there was really nothing we could do about it. We helped him pay for attorney fees or whatever in his divorce, but there's just so little you can really do. You can support them. I prayed for him every single day. And in my divorce, I couldn't control that. I didn't want my marriage to break up. I was heartbroken. So I just think the way I dealt with it is because of my relationship with God. Is I am able to say, you know what, God, this is so out of my control, and I can either let this destroy me, or I can learn and I can be a better person because of it. Because again, every heart is going to be hammered. And I'll tell you what, I always tell people, it's a choice. Life is a choice. And that choice is, I believe God created us as spiritual beings to have a relationship. I mean, I read that you have 5 children. You're a brave soul. You're braver than I am. No, I think
I'm also very horny, Drew. Yeah, so
well, you're having a great time. Good for you.
Bravery, but also some horniness in there. I was
oh
just
my gosh, I love that.
I was just trying to get you to react to that, because I know you're one of my peeps. All right, so I'm down to the last 5 words of our podcast, and so if you've listened to our podcast before, my producer and I, we come up with 5 words. I'm going to say the word. I want you to give me a reaction, a 1-sentence reaction. So if I say the word,
I got a cheat sheet on this. Okay,
all right,
go ahead.
Okay, you ready? I say the word. I say the word faith. You say what?
Everything.
Everything. Okay, it's good. I say the word family. You say
second to everything.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the cool things about family, from a religious perspective, one of the cool things, you don't choose these people. I mean, you chose your husband,
right,
but you don't choose the other people that come in.
Right.
So you have to learn to love everybody unconditionally, and they came in randomly, right?
Right.
They came in by God's choices.
And my sons are fabulous people, but they do think I'm a little wackadoodle. They're not on the same page, but that's okay.
I'd rather be a little crazy. Trust me, it's more fun to be a little crazy, Drew.
Really?
Army. I say the word army. You say what?
Oh, it's 2 words. Good heart.
Okay. What about the one word Drew? DRU.
Relentless.
Okay, I love that. What about the last name Hammer?
Oh, it's just such a perfect name for me. I'm always saying hammer time. What would I say about hammer? I would say strong.
Okay. Well, the title of this book is Hammered. It's written by Drew Hammer. She's an entrepreneur and evangelist, a mom. I'm going to throw mom in there.
Okay? Yes.
A real person and a great author. The book is fantastic. I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed speaking with you as well.
I appreciate that
so thank you for joining us on Open Book.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Hey, thank you for watching this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, here's another one right up here that you might like. While democracy is imperfect, it's a necessary ingredient to good governance, long-term stability, and the diffusion, the wisdom of the crowd usually prevents you from doing outrageous things if you have to be somewhere in the middle and moderate your views. Caesar Augustus ran Rome for 60 years, fairly stable, benevolent dictator in the eyes of many. Is a benevolent dictatorship better than a democracy, or where do you stand on it?
The lessons of these thousands of years of political history, in fact, is that you really do want to have a very strong executive branch, yes, but you do want to have mechanisms of constant feedback from the people. Over the past decades, we've descended into the kind of savior complex mentality where whether you favor the Democratic candidate or the Republican candidate, you always hold that person to somehow be the savior. If you are in the situation where you have to ask that question or have that view, Anthony, you're already in very big trouble. Because the most stable countries in the world, they can go months with a hung parliament and not even having a government and still function very, very well.
Hello and welcome to Open Book. I am your host, Anthony Scaramucci. Our guest is a repeat offender. His name is Parag Khanna. He's a geopolitical expert and author. We're going to discuss today a meta piece of his called The Periodic Table of States, which hopefully at some point he's going to turn into a book. It's great to have you back. Now, last time you were with us, we talked about MOVE, how mass migration will shape the world. But today you want to tell us about the Periodic Table of States. So tell us what that is, actually. What is a Periodic Table of States? Makes me nervous, by the way, because I wasn't so great in 12th grade chemistry,
I was going to say, evidently you weren't, but I wasn't going to call you out, but you just kind of confessed right up front.
Right, yeah.
Great.
No, I wasn't really that good at that.
Great. First of all, you really should have been doing chemistry in like 9th or 10th grade. So that was like a red flag right there when you alluded to 12th grade.
Yeah, well, no, honors chemistry was in 10th grade, and I elected out of that because I have self-awareness, Parag. Okay, so you're just really trying to expose my diminutive intellectual status, which is fine. My viewers and listeners know that what you see is what you get. All right, but you tell us what we need to know. And what is a periodic table of states, by the way? It's a great title. Tell us what we need to know. Hey, everyone. It's Anthony Scaramucci here with some straight talk. Let me tell you, we've got 85% of our viewers who haven't hit the subscribe button yet. What's up with that? It hurts. Listen, I made my career by going all in. Right now, only 15% of our viewers are part of our subscribed family. So please take action. This helps us book more amazing guests. Hit subscribe, join our community, and let's turn these numbers upside down. Now back to the show.
So we actually went out of our way to not overly torture the analogy, but it is an idea that was germinating in my mind. And I explicitly called for 20 years ago when I wrote my first book, I said the states of the world should be organized into a periodic table like the periodic table of elements, and we would measure them according to their strength, their stateness, meaning their cohesion, and their overall stability. And I left that kind of on the table for like 2 decades, and I finally got back around to it. We put our team together. Bottom line, the periodic table of states is just a better way of classifying countries of the world than what we typically have like on the market. You've got your rankings of strength where you always see the US and China, number 1, number 2, kind of obvious, no points for that. Pretty boring, actually. And they use very conventional metrics. You've seen it all before. Number of soldiers at arms, size of the country, population, GDP, the usual stuff. We added to that. We're like, what about your industrial capacity? What about your net international investment position? What about your debt to GDP ratio? So a whole lot of characteristics that in this century are very relevant to the strength of a state. The second bucket is stateness. And that corrects for the weaknesses of most products out there that basically say, it's all about how democratic you are, right? Procedural democracy, how many elections you have, transparency, free and fair elections, rule of law, independent judiciary, and so on. What really matters today, and you and I know this from our travels around the world, is that democracy is not enough. You should be measuring the stateness, the cohesion, the state capacity, the quality of institutions, their efficacy, and all of those other things. You should be looking at internal characteristics like inequality, median income. And then we bring in a whole bunch of novel data sets that really weren't available before, like climate resilience, food security, energy security, AI readiness. And these kinds of data sets have only been around for a couple of years. And let's face it, Anthony, you and I are travelers. We go around the world, we visit countries, and we kick the tires. And we know that what really makes a country stable is not just, did the economists rate you a country that is a top-tier democracy or not, right? Where, again, it's always going to be New Zealand and Finland that are number 1 and 2. Whereas what you really want to know for the 200 countries of the world is, what's their inequality? How good are their institutions? Do they have energy security, food security, AI, climate resilience, all those other things? So anyway, we took these buckets, put it all together, created like a meta index, normalized the data, percentile rankings, scored everything, created a dashboard. And the result is what we call stability. And this is the final key point. What does a country want, Anthony? Do they want to be more democratic for the sake of it? Do they want to be like America? Do they just want strength? No, every country wants to be more stable. You'll never have any disagreement about that, will you? They want stability, they want resilience. So we think we've created the first overarching ranking of countries that really gets at what matters.
All right, so I want to ask a philosophical question, because there's a lot of debate going on right now in our society about these topics. There's a gentleman by the name of Curtis Yarvin. He's a philosopher out on the West Coast. He believes that democracy is obsolete and we need a monarchy. His acolytes include Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, and J.D. Vance. There's others of us, myself included, that believe that while democracy is imperfect, it's a necessary ingredient to good governance, long-term stability, and the diffusion, the wisdom of the crowd usually prevents you from doing outrageous things if you have to be somewhere in the middle and moderate your views. Where do you stand on that? What makes for a more stable government? Again, Caesar Augustus ran Rome for 60 years, fairly stable, benevolent dictator in the eyes of many. Is a benevolent dictatorship better than a democracy, or where do you stand on it?
There is, fortunately, a happy medium. I mean, we have 5,000 years of recorded political history, generally the history of empires, and you cited Rome. Most empires historically have not been democracies, obviously. Authoritarianism and monarchy are more the historical norm. America is an empire, as is China. That's not to say that it was foreordained that we would see some kind of, some will call it a degeneration into the kind of political system that we seem to be evolving into right now. But to get to the point, the optimal political system is not monarchy for the sake of saying that democracy, quote unquote, doesn't work. The lessons of these thousands of years of political history, in fact, if you amalgamate the best practices that you can glean from studying empires, successful states, large and small, is that you really do want to have a very strong executive branch, yes, but you do want to have mechanisms of constant feedback from the people, and democratic elections are among them. But given the technological tools we have available today, you would actually want to have much more rapid feedback loops through canvassing the public on specific issues, not just waiting for elections every few years. So again, a strong executive and a democratic system in which you're gathering the voice of the people are not at all incompatible. But that executive branch, to go into more detail, in the model that I constructed in a previous book called Technocracy in America, you didn't have a single president. What you actually had was a central executive committee. And I borrowed that actually from the most democratic country in the world, Switzerland, right? Switzerland, as you know, doesn't have one president per se. It just has a rotating chair of a central executive council. It works for them and it works for us. And it could work for us. It ensures that you have representation among a broad cross-section of political parties, for example. And there's many other ways in which I think that technocracy, which is a term that obviously should be favored by the Silicon Valley elite that you're referencing, given its origins, but modernized to reflect using data to improve governance and having a system of government that does not in any way, shape, or form rely on any one person. I think that's the fatal flaw. And as you know, Anthony, over the past decades, we've descended into the kind of savior complex mentality where whether you favor the Democratic candidate or the Republican candidate, you always hold that person to somehow be the savior. If you are in the situation where you have to ask that question or have that view, Anthony, you're already in very big trouble. Because the most stable countries in the world, according to our index, in fact, like Switzerland, let's take Germany right next door, they can go months with a hung parliament and not even having a government per se, in the sense of the arrangement of parties to select the leadership, and still function very, very well. I obviously worry that we would not be able to do that, and that makes us less stable.
You know, I'm a big believer in being practical. I think you are too. When I read your stuff, I guess, is it impractical? Is it impractical to push more democracy? Did the United States make a mistake in the early 2000s where they said, okay, we're going to invade Iraq and we're going to promote democracy, or we're going to do these certain things to promote democracy? Is it just that democracy works in certain areas of the world like Switzerland, but doesn't work in certain areas of the world culturally? Or, in other words, I felt like we were democratic imperialists in some ways, and it frankly didn't work. So what, do I have that wrong, or what do you think?
No, I mean, democracy can flourish everywhere. As you know, I've focused a lot on Asia in my work, and there are more people living in democracies and democratic societies in Asia than any other region of the world, right? So it's not necessarily a culturally particular thing. It's all about sequencing, and sequencing is by far the most important word for us to genuinely answer your question. First, you must have stability, right? Law and order. Or as Lee Kuan Yew used to say, order before law, right? So order, then law, state building, a sufficient degree of development and coherence in the society such that everyone is going to participate freely, fairly, equally. So you must get through the law, order and law phase, the state building phase, and then you have the democratic practice. And remember what democracy fundamentally is. Yes, it is cultural, and we can wax philosophical about that. But in day-to-day reality, it is a method of selection for leaders. And unless you have those conditions of stability, you are not going to successfully translate your democratic practice into good governance. And for political scientists like me, good governance is the highest virtue, not democracy for the sake of it. And again, one of the things we do in this index is that because you score countries highly based upon the quality of their governance, not only if they're democratic, you allow for places like Singapore and the UAE and a variety of other countries that quite frankly are being admired everywhere today, as people in the West and in America in particular wake up to the fact that we should emulate those systems. You make place for looking at ways in which democracy is either conditioned or managed or modified in ways that actually lead to good governance. And again, Anthony, it's like this is the kind of stuff that people have been studying for decades, and they've long since come to the conclusion that democracy is not enough, you need better governance. The conclusion that experts have come to is not, to go back to your previous question, it is not, oh yes, democracy is not enough, therefore we should cancel democracy and restore monarchy. You have to have a pretty shallow understanding of the philosophy and the mechanics of modern society and governance to come to a conclusion like that, because it is well within our grasp to be more effective as a government and to have better governance without shelving democracy. I get asked all the time because some people think that because I'm so technocratic and talk about governance and de-emphasize democracy,
we need
somehow
more technocrats, Parag. I want technocrats to run a lot of things, by the way. But
bring it on. So that's what I'm here for, baby. Call me the technocratic. Right. So people will say that, I favor, authoritarian regimes. But then when push comes to shove and people say, well, what's your silver bullet? Anthony, one of my silver bullets is universal mandatory voting from the age of 16 up, right? You want to have a more legitimate democracy? Do that, right? So I am rabidly pro-democratic practice.
Like Australia, by the way. Australia is
Bingo.
That, right?
Australia has it, Belgium, a whole bunch of countries, right? So let's get that up. Let's legislate that. Let's make it a holiday too, for God's sake, right? Let's do all those things. Then you'll have a better democracy, but you still won't necessarily have better governance. For that, you actually need to not dismantle the state, you need to make the state more effective. And again, smart countries don't talk about big government versus small government. It's always about smart government.
Okay. You say something about state capacity versus size of country. So explain that to people. When you're doing your evaluation of different states, what is the difference and what's the definitions?
So state capacity generally is understood as all of the resources that the federal government or other branches of government have at their disposal to actually execute, on policy, right? So it's the proverbial collecting the trash, distributing payments, Social Security, Medicare, tax collection as well, public services, and so on, state capacity. It also obviously includes, military, police, and other kinds of resources. So hard and soft resources within the country. There used to be a strong correlation between the share of tax revenue collected by the state and GDP, right? Or the tax revenue as a share of the budget, and that would correlate to capacity. That's sort of, decoupled a little bit. But we do see that smaller countries that rank high in democracy or governance, right, whether it is Norway or whether it is Singapore and the UAE, are the most highly effective states today. Now, of course, you could say, oh, right, it's so much easier to run a small country than a big country, right? But what we're seeing is that, there are large-ish countries that are starting to do a better job, or there are existing large countries like Japan and Germany that rank very high in state capacity. So we break out those indicators, and what a country like America or a country like Brazil or other very populous countries could learn is to say, well, what are the elements of effective governance and state capacity where we are weak and other large countries are strong, right? And you might say, well, we need to merge certain institutions, right? Or we need to spend less money on bureaucracy or bring in more revenue and taxes or those kinds of things, right? So, and again, I think technology disrupts this conversation. In the past, it was always such obvious and banal correlations between how much you spend and what effectiveness you get. But today, and this is where I think the overall theme around using technology for efficiency is on the right track, even if it's being executed in a kind of move fast and break things fashion, is that you can be a lot leaner with tech than we could be in the past.
Okay, good stuff. I think it's a brilliant exposition of where we are. You got some crypto friendly regimes in there. Okay, do you like crypto?
You know who the crypto friendly regimes are. I like blockchain as a mode of having secure and devolved services. I like blockchain as a way of promoting peer-to-peer capitalism. And as a proponent of peer-to-peer capitalism, crypto fits into my sort of schema and my philosophical priorities in that way. To the extent it enables that and creates greater liquidity and efficiency, I'm all for that. So that's what I really want to see happen. And that's how you speak to the common man, because the common man has to deal with the frustrations of opening up a bank account and cashing checks and these kinds of just almost humiliating indignities that still plague daily life. And even for people of means who have to deal with that, it's quite frankly sickening, and no modern society should have to deal with that anymore. So if blockchain and crypto together are the way in which we do that, that's what I want to see.
You look at the world, and this is going to be part of our future, one way or the other. It's going to evolve, and it'll probably be different than we're all guessing at this moment, but you look at it and say it's going to be part of our future.
And not only that, cross-border payments on a retail level, wholesale level, between governments and central banks, absolutely. Yes, there's geopolitical motivations accelerating that, but it is a good unto itself that should be pursued. And by the way, as you know, one of the most important things we can do to unlock global growth is to reduce the friction in global migration, right? And also to make that secure. And I think that divorcing mobility from nationality is a major objective of mine. And if we can put passports on a blockchain, right? And if people can safely and securely share the personal data that is necessary to be allowed to cross borders and travel and deliver services and be consumers in other countries, that's where, as you know, a major source of future growth is going to come from. So again, a real world application. a real world application that's going to make a big difference.
Okay, so I've got 5 words for you, like I do at the end of every one of my podcasts.
Damn, I forgot about this.
I've got the 5 words. See, this is like, but we get a lot of good feedback on the 5 words.
Yeah, no doubt. It's just that you're going to catch me off guard now.
I'm going to say the word trade. You say what?
Protectionism.
Well, that's what it's become. Yeah, unfortunately. You didn't say free. You said protectionism. Okay. I say the word development. You say what?
Growth.
Migration.
Freedom.
Stability.
Governance.
Okay. What about the word democracy?
Enfranchisement.
Okay, but I was worried you were going to say obsolete. Is it obsolete?
No, absolutely not. It is. Okay. It is more within our capability than ever before to actually achieve genuine democracy, not just in spirit, not just on paper, but in reality. And again, it's a theme I've been working on for a long time. If we simply denigrate, category, and classify countries based upon ideological viewpoints, you would come to the conclusion that a whole swath of countries, including, again, places like Singapore, where I live, that are canvassing the people 24 hours a day for their point of view on every possible topic, from the cost of living to education, immigration, and implementing those policies, right, you would be mistaken. So the ground reality, the ground truth, right, of countries is that democracy is practiced in many different ways, that it is a fundamental pillar of legitimacy. But, let me just put it in terms that everyone can relate to. There's inputs and there's outputs. Input legitimacy and output legitimacy. Democracy is crucial for your input legitimacy, but governance, or to put it even colloquially for us New Yorkers, getting shit done, is crucial for your output legitimacy. And no respectable society, no society where the people believe their system is legitimate, doesn't have a good balance between the inputs and the outputs.
100%. It's so well stated. I'm going to give you the last word. What are we doing next? Are we going to we're going to turn this into a book? What are we doing?
If I didn't have 2 other books backlog, I'll give a shout out to Foreign Policy Magazine, which has worked with me tirelessly for the last few months to produce the periodic table of states and to release it in a super cool interactive format that people will see online. A book version of this would be called The Stability of Nations. I do need to Google whether or not someone's already done a book with that title. But if it's not taken, I will be sufficiently motivated on that basis alone to write the book, The Stability of Nations. So yeah, we got a few things going on.
I really appreciate you coming on today. I look forward to learning more from you. You're a very wise technocrat. Parag Khanna, thank you so much for joining us on Open Book.
Thank you, my friend.
My next person that I had on the show, Ma, was talking about what makes a country great. Do you think a democracy and being in a democracy is important for people?
Of course.
Okay, tell me why.
First of all, the democracy is American, and I'm a true American. I'm not no foreigner or any of that stuff. I think that democracy leads the country.
Well, do you think Trump believes in a democracy, Ma?
No, I think he's a showman. But I don't think the right person ran against him, and that if you ran, we would have
here we go.
The right.
All right, Ma. I love you, Ma. I love you. Okay, don't change, Ma. But let me get to the point, though. In these autocratic regimes, right? He didn't like Mussolini, Pop, right? He thought these people were crazy, right? So what makes a dictator crazy, Ma, in your mind?
A dictator tries to hurt people because they're narcissistic and they want the attention drawn to them. Basically, when they're undone, they're weaker because they have to they become a bully and they try to scare the people.
Right. So you need a democracy to sort of diffuse that and to protect individual freedoms, right?
For sure. That's why America's known to be free.
Okay. So if someone tried to take the democracy away, that would be very bad in the long term, right?
For sure. 100%.
Okay. Anything else you want to say on that topic, Ma? You're on fire right now. You're in fuego, Ma. Okay. What else you want to say? You want to say anything else on that topic, or no? You're done with that topic. You done?
I'm done with that topic. What's the next topic?
Hey, thank you for watching this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, here's another one right up here that you might like.